Hello there and welcome. In this episode, we're going to continue working on the saving system. In the previous episode, we started creating the way to save our game into a binary file. So we had the entire saving logic, and today we're going to continue and create the loading logic. And after all of this is done, we are going to also add the JSON option. And it's going to be very quick because we already have most of these methods that the JSON method is going to use. So if you remember in the previous episode, we already saved the game and we checked out the actual binary file, but we can't even know if the data was saved correctly because we don't have a way to load it. So let's go into the save manager. And if we collapse all of these different regions we created, we can see that we have a general section, to binary section, and a settings section. So inside the general section, right, we are going to add a few more methods. So this is related to the saving. So we can even add another region over here. Saving, and then another region over here. Loading, and then end this region and also end this region over here. So this is the saving section. Let's close this. And then we're going to have a loading section. And this is the end region for the entire general section. So inside the loading section, we are going to add a method, public all game data. So it's going to return an all game data object and it's going to be named load all game data. So this method will be the equivalent to the save all game data. You remember we wanted to check if we're saving to a JSON or if we're saving to a binary. So we have this with the saving and we also need this for the loading, because when we load the game, we also need to know if we're loading from a JSON file and we need to deserialize it, or we want to load from a binary file. So inside we do the same thing. If is saving to JSON, then simply create an all game data object, game data, and we're going to get this object from a method that is going to actually get the data. So load game data from JSON file. And of course, we're going to comment this out because we still don't have this method. And when we get the data, we're going to return it. Now we can also comment this out. And if we're not saving to a JSON and we want to save into a binary form, to a binary file, then the same way, all game data, but this time load game data from a binary file. And this is the method that we already created in the previous episode. So now we also want to return the game data when we get this. So now it's going to yell at us because it needs to have a return in both situations. So we are going to uncomment this, but instead of the JSON file that we still did not create, we are going to use this just so it will not give us an error. And eventually we're going to change this to a JSON method. But basically, if we're saving to a JSON, it's going to load the game data from a JSON file. And if not, then it's going to load it from a binary file. And now when we have this, we also want another method. So it's going to be named public void load game. And this will be equivalent to the save game that we have. We are simply going to, instead of getting the data, we're going to set the data into the game. And then we're going to be able to actually see the different changes inside the game. So over here, we're going to have a method named set player data. and it's a method that we're going to create. So generate method, and inside we're going to pass the actual game data that we want to load. So load all game data, and we want the player data. So now when we set all the data, it's basically all we want to do, and we need to also create these arguments. So we can go over here and add parameters, and it's going to add this player data over here. So this load game will be general. We're going to set the different data into the game. So we have this player data for now, but later we're also going to have environment data and any other data that we have in our game, and we're going to do set environment the same way we do it for the player. But right now we only have this player data, so we're not going to add anything else, but all of these will go over here. So this is a general loading method for all of these different types of data. But inside this set player data, we're only going to set the player data. So we load all game data, and this is the method that we saw earlier, this load all game data. We decide from which kind of file we want to load the game, from a binary or from a JSON, and then it's going to return this data over here, and then we get this data over here, but we only want to access the player data inside, and we want to set this player data. So it's going to be passed over here, and inside we're going to set all the data. Now, before we implement this method, I want to rename two methods because the names that I gave them are not really good. So this load all game data should be called something like select loading type, and this one will be select saving type, because here we're simply selecting which kind of way to save the file, the binary or the JSON. It has nothing to do with actually saving, not in a direct way, so we should call it something like select saving type or saving type switch, right? Otherwise, if we have a lot of load game, save game, we're going to get confused with all of these different methods. So we want to know what the method does exactly, what is the responsibility of the method, and then give it the best name we can. So over here, load game, select loading type, and then we get the player data, and we pass it into the set player data, and over here we're going to set all the data. I think that it's even better to rename this to loading type switch, because if we say set loading type, then it means that this method is only dealing with setting the loading type, but we are also returning something, right? We are returning this all game data. So with a switch, it can be easier to understand that we can even return something and then access it. So the same way, select saving type, switch. But if you want to give it a name that is going to be more understandable to you, then of course do it. Switch. So inside the set player data, it's going to be quite long because we are going to set all the different data. So I'm going to create it and then I'm going to explain it. So it looks a lot like the get player data that we already created, this one, but instead of getting the data from the scene, we're going to set the data into the scene, right? We're going to get this player data, and we're going to access the different states, and we're going to set them into the player state singleton. That is actually what holds all of our states in the scene. And we also want to create a vector for the position. We load it with the position, and then we're going to set it to the player body transform position. So we set all of these things, and then we're going to see these changes in the actual game. So we don't need to return anything because the setting actually happens over here, right? We change the current health, we change the current calories, and this is a singleton that is actually running in the game. Now, in order to load the game, we want to do it before we start the game scene, because we're not going to load in the middle of the scene. Some games do allow it, but in our case, we want to load before the scene starts. So in order to load the game before the scene starts, we need to start the scene, and then when the scene starts, the first thing will be to load the data and change all the different things. That's why when you load the game, you usually have some kind of loading screen and you wait for the game to be loaded, because at this time, all this data is getting loaded into your game. So we're going to do something similar. So we need another method. So let's collapse this loading. Let's collapse this saving. So we have this general saving loading, but we are still going to do it inside the loading. So let's collapse these. And over here, we're going to have a public void load saved game. And you can see that it's not good that I'm using all of these load save because it can get confused. We have this load game and we have this load save game. So maybe it's not the best name. Maybe start loaded game, something like that. And then inside we're going to use the scene manager. Of course, we need to add it to the top of the file, but first scene manager, load scene. And to use it, let's import it. And we want to open our game scene. And this is the name of the game scene that we have. And then when we load the scene, the first thing we want to do is to load all this different data, right? We want to run this set player data. But in order for all the different scripts to start and actually exist, we need to wait for a very small amount of time, just a fraction of a second, but we do need some kind of delay, otherwise it's not going to work. So we're going to actually load the data with a small delay. So let's do start coroutine, and inside we're going to create a coroutine, delayed loading, and then we're going to create this method, and it's going to be an I enumerator. And of course this is wrong. So inside we're going to do yield return new wait for seconds, and we're going to wait about 1 second, okay? So after this second is over, all of these different singletons and different scripts will be loaded, and then we can actually do the change. So then we're going to call this load game method. And we can also print game loaded. So we don't actually need to do this because we are going to add this inside. Well, we actually have this over here. Yes, data saved, and we can also add this over here. Let's copy all of this. Data loaded from, and then we're going to leave it the same way. Now inside this main menu scene, we want to load the game because this is the only place we can load the game. So before we create some kind of menu for the load game, we're going to just test it. So when we click on this load game, it's not going to open the menu, but it's just going to load the game. So instead of starting a new scene like we do with this new game, we're going to start a new scene, but we're going to change the data by loading the save data. So for now, we're simply going to click on this load game. So in order to do this, we're going to go inside our main menu script, and we're going to have a reference to the button. So public button load game button, and inside the start method, start, we're going to do load game button. And we're going to access the save manager instance and run this load start loaded game. So when we click on this button, it's simply going to run this method that we created inside the player manager. Okay, so now everything should work and we can load the game. In the previous episode, we created a save file, but if you don't remember, we're just going to create a new save file and it's going to override the old save file. And don't worry, later we're going to have an option to create more than just one save file. But for now, we have this one save file, and because the path is always the same, right? Over here, we can see that we only have this one path, then it's always the same file. And if we save again, then it simply overrides this file and deletes the old content. So let's start this and see if everything is working. Of course, I know that something is missing. Inside the main menu, we need a reference to the button. So this button. Now let's start. So we start a new game and we are going to walk around and we're going to just climb this hill. We are going to walk a bit so the stats will go down. So just remember that we are standing on this hill, and if we click on the player, we can also see the position of the player, and we can also see the different stats. So if we go to system and we click on the player state system, we can see the different states. So we have the current calories, we have the hydration percent. So remember, about 82 hydration and less than 2000 calories. Remember that we are at 131 X position. And now we're going to save the game. Let's also look at the value. So we're going to open the menu and we click on save game. And now we can see at the bottom that it saved the game into this bin file, this save game bin. And if we quit the game and return, then of course everything will be deleted because we did not load the game, we simply started a new game. But now if we quit and we load the game, it should bring us to the position and to the different stats that we had before. So the transition is not going to be very good looking because we did not create any kind of loading screen. So you may see it like jump around and all, but just know that when we created this coroutine, this delay, we also need to add some kind of loading screen over there so the player doesn't see all of this moving around that we don't want him to see. So we load the game and you can see that in the beginning we were in the first position, but then after another second we moved to this position. And now if we go over here, we can see that we are at 131, and we can also see that we have less than 80% because that went down as we talked, and we also have this amount of calories. So all of this data was actually loaded successfully. Now that we have a way to save our game into a binary file, we can also add a way to save it into a JSON file. Now, it's not going to be very long because we already did all of the work, right? We created all of these general methods, and the JSON will just use these general methods the same way the binary is using, right? Because inside the binary, we only have 2 methods. That's everything we need to save it into a binary file. And we're also going to have 2 methods for the JSON. So we're going to copy all of this. We're going to paste it over here. And we're going to rename this to JSON section. And we can also delete all of this from these methods. But now we're going to rename them to save game data to JSON file and load game data from JSON file. Now we can collapse this binary section because, as I told you, we are not interested in using this way. You can use it and you have the option and you saw how it's done, but I don't like this way and I explained to you the different disadvantages, so we're going to use the JSON way. So we're just going to collapse this and we're not going to use it. Now, before we start working on these JSON methods, we also want to make our script more efficient, and we don't want these hard-coded file locations, right? Because later we're going to have more than one save game, and we also want to be able to change the name of this, so we don't want to hard-code it inside the method. It's never a good idea. So for this, at the top, we're going to create so the binary is going to be a string with the binary path, and we're going to set it inside the start. So we don't have a start method. Let's create a start method. And when the script starts, it will basically populate this binary path. Let's rename this path. So binary path equals basically this, right? This is the path. So we copy this and it's going to be set to this variable, this global variable. So we don't need to actually write it 2 times or even 4 times, right? We have this 4 times over here. So it's not efficient. We only want to have this once over here. And for the JSON path, we actually have 2 different paths, because with the JSON, we can save it into the project files, or we can save it to the actual external folder that is going to be created when we build the game, and that is actually going to get installed on your player's computer. So this one will be string JSON path project and string JSON path persistent. And we're going to set both of them inside the start. So this one will be application data path plus path alt directory separator and save game JSON. And then for the persistent, it's going to be persistent data path, okay? And we're going to have the same name over here. Now we can basically just take this binary path, and over here inside both of these methods, we can replace all of this. And we don't actually need to do this. We can just put it over here straight away. And we can also place it over here. And then with the loading, we don't need this. And we place it over here and over here and over here. So you see that we are using this one variable when we actually used 5 different places before with a hard-coded string. So it's always good to do this. Now let's create the JSON methods. So let's collapse this because now we really don't need this anymore. So we have both of these methods. The saved JSON file, we're simply taking all of this game data object and we're going to convert it into a JSON and we're going to save it over here. So what does it mean to convert it into a JSON? It will basically take the structure of this object and it will create a string with a JSON format. Okay, so we're going to see this when we actually create the file, and you're going to see how this JSON format looks like. But it basically takes this object and it converts it into a string of JSON. And then we're going to use this stream writer, and this is just a way to write into a file, and we want to write this JSON. So this is the destination of the file, right? This is the JSON path project that we had over here. And right now, because we're just developing the game, we're testing the game, we're going to use this project save path because we want to access the file in an easier way. We don't want to go to the files of the game and look for the file. So when you actually build the game and release the game, you're going to use this thing. You're going to replace this path with this path and place it over here, because this will actually save the JSON in the folder of your game, and then the players can find the folder. But for now, we're going to use this thing. So you're going to change between these two manually. And then when we started using this stream writer, it basically opened the stream. So now we're using the writer to write the JSON into this file. And we can also say that it's done, right? And the loading is basically the opposite. We're using a reader to read a file from this path, and then it's going to read this entire file, and it's going to take the string from the file into this string over here. And then it's going to convert this JSON string into an object, right? Here we converted the object into a string, and here we convert the string back into an object, and then we can return the object over here, and this will go into the switch, right? So loading, we have this switch, so we want to load from a JSON. And with the saving, we should do the same. So we take this method over here, and we're going to place it into the saving switch. So saving, and we place it over here. And of course, we need to provide it with the game data. And you can see that it's very easy to navigate all of these methods when we have everything in regions and everything is organized. So let's save this as well, and we have everything over here. And now if we go into our game, and this time we actually want to click on the save manager and enable this is saving to JSON, right? If you don't want to use the binary, you can just delete this section over here and you don't need to deal with this. But if you want to have both of them, then just select is saving to JSON. And now it's going to save into a JSON file and not inside this bin file. And you're going to see the difference. With the bin file, we could not open it. And even if we opened it with the HexDump, we didn't see anything useful. But with the JSON, it's going to be different. So let's start a new game. And let's walk somewhere different. Let's go to this little hill over here. And now we are standing at, let's say, 386. We have these different states, right? We have less than 100 hydration, we have less than 2000 calories, and we are looking at this mountain over here. So now we're going to save the game, and you can see that this time it saved the game into our assets folder, and we have this save game JSON. So now we can quit the game, we can close this, and let's find this file. So it's inside our assets folder, but you're not going to see it right away because you need to refresh it. So you're going to right click and refresh, and now you can see the file over here. So if we click on this file, we can see the content over here, although everything is very stuck together, but we can open this, we can double click on it, and it's basically a text file with this JSON information. Now this is a JSON format, but you don't see it very well because it's not formatted and it's just one long line. So let's take all of this, let's copy this, and let's open a website named JSON Formatter. I'm going to leave this link in the description. It's very useful. Even if you just work with JSON, it's very useful. So when you get this kind of unformatted JSON, you simply paste it over here and then you process. And now we get the actual JSON format. So let's make this bigger. And you can see that everything is inside some kind of order. If we collapse this, we have the player data because that's the only thing that we actually saved. And yes, we saved the all game data object, but this is the entire object, right? This is the object and we don't have a field inside that is named all game data. It's simply a container for this player data. And if we go back to our file and we open the all game data, we can see that we only have this player data object inside, right? So that's what we see over here. We have this object, and inside this object, we have two other fields. We have this player stats and we have player position and rotation. So we have this one array of player stats with the different values, and we have another array with 6 other floats for the position and for the rotation. And the cool thing is that we can actually see all of this information. We can see if we have some kind of problem, if everything is saved the way we want to, right? Later we're going to have a lot of information inside this file, so it's good that we can simply organize it this way and collapse things, and everything is sorted in a very clean way. So this is a big benefit, but the problem is that if a player finds this file, he can simply open it and get all of this information. And even worse, he can come over here and then take one of these stats. For example, one of these stats will be the XP of the player or the level of the player. He can simply come over here, change the value, and then save this file. And your game is going to think that this is the actual value. So it's very vulnerable to modding and to hacking basically, right? It's not even hacking, it's just modifying the content of the file. With the binary, we could not do it. With the binary, you could not know what is inside. But with the JSON, it's very easy to just open the file and change the content. And that's the difference between both of these methods. But why did I tell you that I still prefer the JSON method? Because first of all, the binary is not secure, it can get corrupted, and if it's corrupted, then you just lose all of the data forever. But with the JSON, it's never going to be corrupted because it's just a string of words, right? So it's never going to get corrupted. Only if the text file is going to be somehow corrupted, but I don't think that it's even possible. So this way you will never lose the data. But what do we do with this problem that player can actually modify the file? Because right now we're using this JSON path project and it saves it inside the project. But later we're going to use this persistent path and it's going to save this file inside the game folder. So when the player opens the game folder, if it's in Steam or something, he is going to find this file and you can just open it with any text editor. So in order to solve this problem and still use JSON because it's really comfortable and easy, we are going to encrypt the JSON file. So we're going to create the JSON file and then we're going to encrypt it. And you already saw it in the chart. We're creating a JSON, but then we're going to encrypt it and decrypt it. And when the file is going to be encrypted, then there is no way someone is going to know what is inside because it's just going to be gibberish, right? So that's a way to secure the JSON file, and then we don't have any problems with the JSON. So let's go into our save manager, and over here we're going to add another method for the encryption. So let's create another section, even though it's going to be very small. And inside we're going to create the method that is going to encrypt the JSON and also decrypt it. And you're going to see that we can do it with only one method because that's the way it works. And I'm going to explain to you. Okay, so don't be afraid of this method because it's quite simple. You do need to know a few things in basic computer science like bytes and bits, but I'm going to try to explain it even if you don't know anything about it. Now, you don't need to know the logic behind this. You can simply copy this method and it will work, right? But for those of you who want to develop their skills and they want to become better developers, it's really nice to understand what is going on and it's quite cool. So when we're going to create the JSON file, before we create the JSON file, we're going to create the JSON string, right? And then we want to encrypt the string. We want to transform it into an unreadable string. And only then we're going to save the unreadable string, basically the encrypted string, into the file. So before we create the JSON file, we are going to send it to this method. So we can also rename this to JSON. Or even JSON string, so it will be more obvious. We're going to pass the JSON string into this method, and it's going to do the encryption and decryption. And if you're wondering how can it do both, you're going to understand. So let's start with the encryption. When we first send the JSON string, it's going to have some English data, some words, right? We're going to have something like this, player data, and then these brackets, and player stats, and numbers, values. So that's what we're going to get inside this JSON string. Then we have a keyword, and that's something unique that you can actually change, but just for the example, we're going to use this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This is the key that is going to be used to encrypt this JSON string. Now, you better keep it somewhere more secure and definitely don't tell about this to anyone, because if someone is going to get this keyword and then they get the encrypted JSON file, they can use this to decrypt the file. So first of all, we have this keyword, we have this empty result string. And what we're basically doing here, we have a loop, a for loop, and we just go over this JSON string, okay? We go over every character inside this string. Now, length is the length of the string because this is a string. So what is the length of the string? It's the length of all of its characters. So the string is not just a separate word. All of this information is one big string. So when we say string length, we mean the length of this entire string. So each character is one index. This is index 0. this is index 1, index 2, index 3, and it will loop over this entire string and it will go one index at a time, okay? And when it goes over one character at a time, it's going to do something and then it's going to add the result into this result string, okay? In the beginning it's empty, but then we're going to return it back from this method. So the result is the actual encrypted or decrypted string, right? And this is what we return. So what happens over here? It basically takes this index of the string, right? It takes the first one, this bracket, because I will be 0. So in the beginning, I will be 0. It will be this one. So it will take this bracket and then it's going to do some kind of operation on it. And this operation is named an XOR bitwise operator. Now, don't worry if you never heard these words. And again, you don't need to know all of this. This is actually touching the bytes and the bits of the code. Usually developers don't even go this far, right? So it's good to know. And if you just want to try to understand, it's going to benefit you. So we're doing this XOR operation on the keyword. And inside the keyword, we go to the first index, right? It's going to be 0 because in the beginning, I is 0. So this will be 0, which is the first index. And this will be 0, which is the first index. So this is the first index of the keyword, right? This 1. But why are we doing this modulus over here? Because think about it. This string is more than 7 characters, right? It's way more. But here we only have 7 characters. So if we get to 8, or actually 7, and I will be equals to 7, here it's not going to be a problem because we're going to be at 7. But over here, we're going to have a problem because we're going to be out of bounds. So it's going to throw an out of bounds exception. That's why we're doing this modulus keyword length. So the length is going to be 7, right? So when we go over 7 and we reach 8, it's simply going to do modulus 7 and the result will be 7. But we basically compare one character with a character from this keyword. And then in the second loop, we compare the second one with the second one. And then in the third one, we compare this P with the third one. And so on. And when it reaches 8, it will simply compare it with 1 again and with 2 again. But what happens inside this comparing of the characters? Because we take this thing and we compare it to the keyword. But we compare it with this XOR bitwise operator. And what this bitwise operator does is basically it's asking us, is there a difference? But not a difference in the string itself, right? Because this is a bracket and this is 1. So of course there's a difference. And then this is a quotation mark and this is 2. So of course there's a difference. It doesn't check the difference in the string. It checks the difference in the actual byte of this character. Because each character you see in the code has some kind of byte value. And you can also see it in this other website that I'm going to give you a link to. So if we put, let's say, Mike, we get the bytes for the different characters. So the same way, if we put all of this string that we saved, and we place it over here, we're going to get the byte array of this data. So the first bracket will be this thing, and then these quotation marks will be this thing, and the P will be this thing. So if we take this, it should be P, right? So let's copy this and let's go to binary to string converter. We can see that this equals the P character. So each character, and doesn't matter if it's a letter or a number, has some kind of binary value. So we're going into low level over here, but this is the logic behind this. And now we're going to dive even deeper, because we are not going to look at these entire bytes, but we're going to look at the different bits inside the byte, right? Each byte consists of 8 different bits. So for example, this string was only my name, Mike. It would look something like that. So we would get this Mike over here. And then it goes into this loop and it does this bitwise XOR operation. I don't know if you pronounce it XOR or XOR, but it does this operation. It compares this character, which will be the M, with the first index of the keyword, which will be 1. But as I told you, it's not going to look for a difference in the string itself, M and 1. It will look for a difference in the byte itself, right? In the structure of the byte. So the M looks like that. But the key, the first key, which is 1, looks like that, because this is 1 in binary, right? So what will it do? It will go over all of these bits and it will check if there is a difference. And then it's going to create another byte using the difference. And this is what this bitwise XOR operator does. So in our case, it will take the M and it will start comparing, and it will always ask, is there a difference? So over here, is there a difference? No, there is no difference. The first bit is 1, and over here the first bit is 1. So it's going to create a 0 because there is no difference. Is there a difference over here? No, there is no difference, so it's going to create a 0. Is there a difference over here? Yes, there is a difference. 1 and 0 are not the same, so there is a difference, so it's going to create this 1. And also over here, there is a difference, so it's going to create 1. Over here, there is no difference, 0, and so on. So this is the new encrypted byte that will represent some kind of character. And we don't care which kind of character it will represent because it will just be gibberish, right? We can take this, the result, the encrypted byte. We can open this again and we can paste it over here and it will create this I. I think it's a capital I. So the first letter of my name is going to get encrypted and the result will be I. And then it's going to do the same with the I and the K and the E, and it's going to do the same for this entire string. It's going to compare the string to this keyword, and it's going to do this XOR operation, and it's going to create an entire byte array of encrypted bytes. So this is the way we encrypt the file. But then when we want to load the game, we want to decrypt the file. And the good thing is that we don't need to create a separate method. We can use the same method because it will basically do the same thing and we're going to get our old result. So when we're going to decrypt the JSON, it's going to be encrypted, right? It's going to be this gibberish. So it's going to be passed over here. And then it's going to do the same thing with the keyword, but this time it's going to be with the encrypted JSON. So then we start with the encrypted, right? We compare it to the key, and we're going to get a result. And the result will be this M that we got before, because it's going to compare it. It's not the same, so 1. It is the same, so 0. It's not the same, 1. It's not the same, 1. So it created this M back, and it will do the same thing for this entire JSON string. So we're going to get our original data back, and then we can just convert it back into an object and load it into the game, and everything will work. So this is the logic behind this thing, and I'm really glad if you didn't know this and now you understand. And don't worry if you don't really understand this, because it's really low-level things that most developers, or just a lot of developers, don't even go this deep and they don't care. But it's nice to know, because you may stumble upon something like that in the future. So let's see how this works. First of all, we need to change our methods to use this thing before we save it into a file. So we go into our JSON section, and over here, after we get the JSON, right, we convert this object into a JSON string, and before we write it into a file, we are going to have a string named encrypted, and we're going to call this encryption decryption, and inside we're going to pass this JSON, right? So it's going to take this JSON and it's going to encrypt it, and then the encrypted string is going to be saved over here, and then we're simply writing this encrypted into the file. And then inside the load, we are going to have a string decrypted, encryption decryption. We use the same method, but this time it's going to receive the encrypted JSON, right? Because it was saved as encrypted. And then we are going to take the decrypted and create an object out of it. So now we can save and everything should work. So we go back over here, and this time we need to create a new save so it will override this regular one. So let's start the game. New game. And we just move somewhere else, it doesn't matter. And now we're going to save. And we can quit. And now if we close the game and we refresh, we click on this save game and we open this, and we can see that all that we see inside is gibberish because the file is encrypted and there is no way to understand what is going on inside. The only way is to run this XOR operation with the keyword, but the keyword is something secret that only you are going to have, so no one will even know how to decrypt it. But you are going to be able to decrypt it, and you can also find the file inside your project for the different debugging. So this way you can work with JSON and you don't even need to worry anymore. And of course, when we start the game again and we load the game, it's going to load the game, and this is where we saved the game. So everything is working as it should. Right now, we have a working saving and loading of the game. We can save into a binary file. We can save into a JSON file. The only thing that is missing is the actual menus, right? Because we don't want to load this way. We want to have multiple saved games. So we want to create some kind of loading menu, and we want to create a saving menu. And then we're going to have different slots. And then when we click on one slot, it's going to save the game into a specific save game. And the same thing, when we load the game, we have a menu and we can select which save game we want to load. So all of this we're going to do in the next episode. And of course, we also need to save more things. We need to save the inventory, we need to save the environment, the items that we picked up, and the things that should be lying around in the world. And of course, the bigger the game is going to get, we're going to add more things that we need to save into the saving manager. But I think that even now, you will know how to do it yourself. And if not, then we're going to continue in the next episode. So thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you're still not subscribed. It will help me a lot. And also leave a like. It will also help me a lot. So see you next time.